Okay, welcome back to our regular session. For those of you who are unable to see our study session because we were having some technical difficulties, we apologize. We know under the current circumstances that can happen, and it's just something we have very little to no control over. We do our very best, and we are thankful to those who are behind the scenes right now, who are working viciously to try to make sure we could have our regular session live. So with that, I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is 6:18 according to my clock when I'm calling the meeting to order. And at this point in our meeting, we are immediately going to ask for a motion to go into executive session. And that motion is right on our agenda right there. So if somebody, a member of the board, would like to make that motion, and then when we come back, we will go through the regular items in order for a regular session once we leave the executive session, if we do have a motion and a vote on executive session first. Is that correct, Helen? Am I okay? Thumbs up?
Thumbs up.
Okay. Good. All right. So do I hear a motion for executive session?
We would ask President Minor that they read it in the complete detail of the recommended action, so it's a little long.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that reminder. I appreciate it.
I recommend the governing board move into executive session pursuant to ARS 38-431.03 AI, discussion or consideration of employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, demotion, dismissal, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of a public officer, appointee or employee of an public body, except that, with the exception of salary discussions, an officer, appointee, or employee may demand that the discussion or consideration occur at a public meeting. The public body shall provide the officer, appointee, or employee with the written notice of the executive session as it is appropriate, but not less than 24 hours for the officer, appointee, or employee to determine whether the discussion or consideration shall occur at a public meeting. You're on mute, President Minor.
I apologize. Do I hear a second on that motion?
I'll second it. Jenny Richardson.
Thank you, Mrs. Richardson. I am going to make note that our board member, Mrs. Hutchinson, just had an emergency and had to leave, so she may not be back for this board meeting. We wish her well on her emergency. It makes me feel bad that she had to leave suddenly. So we will only have the remaining board members able to vote on this motion. So with that, Mrs. Sears?
Aye.
Mrs. Richardson, I'm sorry, Mrs. Richardson?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
And Mrs. Minor, aye. Okay, that is a vote, a majority vote or a fourth vote for going into executive session. And I will go out of this meeting and invite you into a new meeting. Correct?
President Minor, I just wanted to make mention that the 4 board members and then the 5th one, including Mrs. Hutchinson and myself, will red X this meeting and actually leave this meeting. And then we will enter the executive session of the invitation that you have provided. And then when we're ready to come out of executive session, I will notify Mrs. Collins, because she will need to allow us back into the original meeting at that time. So
okay.
Please red X this meeting.
And members of the superintendency who are still on, we will treat this like a break. You can mute your microphones and your camera. I will send a WebEx to the superintendency list when Dr. Lesser notifies me that the executive session is over, so that you don't have to stay tethered to your computer or your screen. Just keep your phone at hand so that when I WebEx you that we're coming back live, you can get yourself settled and ready to go. Thanks.
Welcome back to our regular session. What we will be doing right now is getting a vote, and I'm first beginning with a motion to go out of executive session, and then we will begin with continue on with our regular session. So do I hear a motion to leave executive session, excuse me?
I move that we leave executive session.
Thank you, Mrs. Richardson. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Then starting with Mrs. Sears for the vote.
Aye.
Mr. Peterson,
Aye.
Mrs. Richardson,
Aye.
and Mrs. Minor, aye. And that's a vote of 4 to go out of executive session. And the time, I believe, is 7:12. I will start by mentioning that one board member, Mrs. Hutchinson, will be available this evening. She had to leave on an emergency, and we wish her well and her family as well, as she had to suddenly leave, and we will miss her in this board meeting. I will begin by welcoming you to the regular meeting of the Mesa Public Schools Governing Board. On March 30th, 2020, Governor Doug Ducey announced that Arizona schools would be closed for the rest of the year due to the COVID-19 health crisis. In early April, when his stay-at-home order was issued, governmental functions, including school board governing board meetings, were exempted from the order. So while it is legal to have an in-person school district governing board meeting, our district is choosing to exercise safe social distancing for our meetings by using a virtual meeting platform. The following will be the rules we are using for our meetings. Although members of the board are not gathered in a central physical location, we do have a quorum in attendance at this meeting by video conference. We are meeting by use of WebEx conferencing platform and live streaming through YouTube. Got interference. I hope you can hear me. YouTube, which allows for members of the public to view and/or listen to this meeting. You can access the live stream at mpsaz.org/live, which should be on your screen. If you need accommodations, please contact Martha Head, Assistant to the Superintendent and Governing Board, at 480-472-0201. At this time, the board is taking public comment through an online form. You can access it at bit.ly/MPS comment, and that too is on your screen. And submitted comments will be read aloud at the appropriate time during the meeting. And the appropriate time would be on the agenda item if the comment has to do with that agenda item. All other meeting procedures will adhere to board adopted procedures to the extent practicable. A recording from this meeting will be available to the public via our district's board docs online software within 3 business days of the meeting. We apologize in advance for any unforeseeable difficulties and ask for your patience as we navigate unprecedented conditions. We have had some technical difficulties this evening, but we have navigated through them and we are live and very happy to have all of you with us who wanted to visit us while we have our regular session this evening. So thank you. With that, we are going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and we have Mrs. Richardson who is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Mrs. Richardson.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excellent, thank you. And we will now hear from the Emerson Elementary School Choir for our national anthem. That is great. You know, when you watch them sing, it really makes you feel like I miss seeing kids, and especially in a classroom and on a stage and together singing in all forms. I really am looking forward to the day when we can have that back again. So we're praying for that to come soon. All right, the next item on our agenda is the review of agenda, and I don't believe there's any items that we need to change or anything to review, so we will move on to the review of governing board calendar, and I will defer to Dr. Lesser to go over our calendar.
Excellent. President, minor members of the board, as I take a look at the calendar for the remainder of June, we're at a board meeting this evening on the 17th, which is next Wednesday. We have the second portion of the ASBA Summer Leadership Institute. I believe that's from 3 to 5 p.m. virtually. Our last meeting of this fiscal year is June 23rd. We will be celebrating the official 4th of July, or Independence Day is the 3rd of, as far as the work calendar. So we will not be working on July 3rd. As we enter the month of July, we have 2 board meetings, one on the 14th and one on the 28th. There are other things going on over the course of the next month and a half. I'm not going to talk about those now because in a little bit, Dr. Forlis and Mrs. Williams will be talking about the task force to open up schools. And there will be some important dates that will be included in that conversation that will inform the board of the work being done to open up our schools for the new school year. So that's really the calendar at this time. Mrs. Minor, any questions that you might have?
I do. I know we may not be able to pinpoint a date tonight, especially in light of that Mrs. Hutchinson isn't here. But I know that there has been interest in having another study session for some items that are related to our new superintendent and not her transition necessarily, but items that we want to talk about as a board that has been brought up to me that people would like to talk about. So just want to keep that in mind, and people, our board, keep some dates in mind that you will be available. I know, Stephen, you like to have meetings at 5 or later. We want to keep that in mind, and maybe you can weigh in. Maybe we can even consider a Saturday meeting. I know Saturdays are kind of sacred, especially for us working people. But anyway, keep that in mind. I'll have Martha send out a text to all of you to get some ideas of what works well with everyone.
Excellent.
I also am wondering, how long do you anticipate that we will be meeting virtually instead of in person? Do we have a transition plan for that? I know that I will be out of town that first board meeting in July, but I'm happy to try to participate virtually if that's going on. And I guess I'm looking for a little direction for July.
This is Helen. As long as we stay in phase 1 of the state reopening of Arizona, I believe we will need to maintain a virtual environment for our meetings because of the accessibility for our public. Even with the technology issues we had tonight, we're still providing accessibility for more than 10 people, and that's important for the transparency of the governing board.
On the calendar, typically in July, there's been the new to teaching and welcoming back. Do you anticipate those meetings being held, and did you want a board member to attend at that? Typically, has been the governing board president. And then in the past, we've had a retreat with the superintendency on the issues. Is that something that we're covering through Dr. Forlis's contract, or are we going to have a broader retreat this summer?
Mr. Peterson, this is Pete Lesser. I won't be here in July, but and maybe this is really for Dr. Forlis. But I will say this: the teams, the design teams that are working about the opening of school are tackling those types of issues that you have discussed about new teachers, and will that be virtual, and what will that look like, and teaching and learning is involved in that. Maybe answering that right now would be getting the cart in front of the horse, but we appreciate the heads up that there are certain things happening in July, later in July, and even general administrator meetings when board president or members of the board, do address, new teachers or administrators. And I know that Dr. Forlis will keep that in mind. Dr. Forlis, do you have additional thoughts, regarding what the near future holds with regard to that? I'm sure that Tracy's been contemplating that as well.
Thank you, Dr. Lesser. At this point, all of our large group gatherings are planned virtually up until the beginning of school. So all of the plans for new teachers, teachers new to teaching, teachers new to Mesa, as well as our administrator academies are all planned virtually. In fact, we kick off our administrator academy tomorrow as we close down the school year, and that's all going to be done through WebEx and or Zoom on Wednesday and Thursday of this week. So we have not scheduled anything in person prior to the beginning of the school year for adults.
So, Mr. Peterson, to answer your question, it probably makes sense that Andy and I make sure that we get together with Martha to get things on the calendar, to let all of you know when those things are occurring, and if there is a role for a virtual welcome, that we include the board members for whatever that might look like. President Minor?
Okay, sorry about that. I had a technical difficulty. My computer just suddenly shut down for no reason. And I don't have any reason why. So I had to put up something else. So we're going to move on to the next item, the consent agenda. That's why I had to get on another screen, because I have to read this and I didn't have it in front of me. So the consent agenda items, all items listed will be considered as a group and will be approved with one motion. There will not be separate discussion of these items unless a board member or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered as a separate item. So do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
I, Kiana Sears, make a motion that the consent agenda items be received and adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Sears. Do I have a second?
A second.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Seconds it. Then for the vote, Mrs. Richardson.
Aye.
Mrs. Sears.
Aye.
Mr. Peterson.
Aye.
And, I didn't ask for discussion. I think I did. Okay, and my vote, Mrs. Minor, aye. And so that's a unanimous vote of 4. And of course, Mrs. Hutchinson not being here. So that moves approval of the consent agenda. Excuse me, I'm continuing to open up my computer now. Fortunately, I do have a printed copy of the agenda. So we will move on to our action items. Number 7A, and this is approval for the minutes of a study session held on May 26, 2020. I need a motion for that.
So moved.
And thank you, Mr. Peterson. A second.
Kiana Maria Sears, seconds.
Thank you, Kiana. And then the vote would be Mr. Peterson.
Aye.
Mrs. Richardson.
Aye.
Mrs. Sears.
Aye.
And Mrs. Minor, aye. And that is 4 votes in favor of approving the minutes from May 26, 2020. Next, item 7B, minutes of a regular meeting held on May 26, 2020. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Richardson. A second?
Kiana Sears, seconds.
Thank you. A second by Mrs. Sears. A vote, Mr. Peterson.
Aye.
Mrs. Richardson.
Aye.
Mrs. Sears.
Aye.
And Mrs. Minor, aye. That's a vote to approve the minutes from May 26, 2020. Next, C, minutes of a study session. I need a motion for minutes of a study session meeting held on June 2nd, 2020.
Kiana Maria Sears, so move.
Thank you, Mrs. Sears. And the second, please.
I second.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. And the vote, Mrs. Richardson,
Aye.
Mrs. Sears,
Aye.
Mr. Peterson,
Aye.
and Mrs. Minor, aye. And that as well has been approved for the meeting held on June 2nd, 2020. Now we go to certificated and classified personnel requests, and I believe that's Dr. Holmes.
Madam President, members of the board, we are asking your approval this evening of the certificated and classified personnel requests.
Okay, I need a motion.
I move that we approve the certificated and classified personnel requests.
Thank you, Mrs. Richardson. A second, please.
I'll second. Kiana Maria Sears.
Thank you. And then the vote, Mr. Peterson,
Aye.
Mrs. Richardson,
Aye.
Mrs. Sears,
Aye.
Mrs. Minor, aye. Oh, I didn't add, I apologize. I assumed there was, Dr. Holmes, was there any discussion or clarification or anything that you needed to add with that?
Not for myself, no.
Okay. I apologize. I jumped too quickly.
Dr. Holmes, can you say the line that you normally say? You have just.
Oh.
Oh, that actually, okay, I'm tracking you. Dr. Forlis, I believe that might be to you. Or perhaps not.
She's on mute.
Well, I will tell you, with your approval of the certificated and classified personnel requests this evening, you have added 3 appointments this evening. In the special education department, we've added, you've approved team leader Adam Esslinger. You have also approved assistant principal Preston Peterson at Mesa High, and very pleased to promote Eric Von Berg to director of teaching and learning.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you. Any comments from anyone else before we move on?
Thank you, Dr. Holmes. I could not unmute for some crazy reason.
That's fine.
I appreciate the teamwork.
Okay, we are now moving on to item 7E, the 2019-20 performance-based pay for the interim superintendent. And we need a motion to read, just like you read it on your agenda from a board member. Do I hear a motion?
I recommend the approval of the 2019-2020 performance-based pay for the interim superintendent in the full amount of $28,400.
Thank you, Mrs. Richardson. Do I have a second for that?
I second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or questions regarding this item? I would like to talk about it briefly before we vote on it, because I think this is an opportunity to express, first of all, to Dr. Lesser, a big thank you for all the hard work that he has done for this district. At the beginning of his time, which was December 3rd, we spoke with him on December 2nd. He started on December 3rd. And he has been busy, busy, busy ever since, every day. Weekends included and evenings. He's been a very busy man. And I would just like to say that there has been a quote that I got from Dr. Forlis today that she gave me, and she said, there isn't a day that goes by where you don't hear from somebody who said there is nobody else who could do this like Dr. Lesser. And I have to concur with that. He's done a great job. He has been faced with many, many challenges, as all of us can attest to. These have been difficult times. And one of the challenges of the COVID-19 was not one he anticipated, and I think that would have been the one that sent him over the edge where he would have said, no, thank you. So we're really glad that he was not aware that that would occur. But let's walk through the performance goals that we set for Dr. Lesser back in January, and we approved those goals at that time. And today we discussed those goals and his performance and would like to go through them with everyone else. Number 1, stabilize the district during transitional time. He increased focus on clear and consistent communication to our community and staff. He gave regular updates. He was responsive to people that contacted him, and no matter what way, whether that was through text, emails, phone calls, he was always returning phone calls and responsive. I remember one day he was on a phone call with a gentleman for over an hour who had already talked to multiple people in the district, but Dr. Lesser felt that he needed to talk to him as well because this gentleman wanted to talk to him, and he spent a lot of time. He led the work on a 3-part plan to tackle unapproved compensation. That was an extensive process where he had to sit down with multiple people and have conversations. And because of his style and ability to talk with people, and because of the respect that this district has for him, he was able to do that quite successfully. And we appreciate the fact that all the superintendents that have worked with him over the past 6 months have appreciated and have enjoyed his efforts as well. We really appreciate that. The next one would be facilitate the transition to a new superintendent. And this is one where Dr. Forlis could really speak to, but we also observed that he created a reorganization plan of our superintendent team. I want to make sure I didn't get this out of order. So there were other items that I would like to also highlight under stabilize the district during transitional time before I move on to Andy's transition that I did not remember to add here. So reorganization plan of our superintendent team. He reduced the team, creating a savings of about $500,000 for the district. He moved forward with a compensation plan for the superintendents for the new year, which also was a savings of nearly $500,000 for the school district. This created more trust and stability for our district. He led us through school closures, required clear and consistent communication with administration and staff. And he was involved in that because during those times when many things are happening and there's lots of things going on in different directions, communication is key. And he developed consistent communication throughout the district and with his administrators. And now on to facilitate the transition to a new superintendent. He welcomed Andy in all of the decision making and allowing her to give reflection. She mentored Andy as well. He mentored Andy as well as the entire superintendent team. He embraced shared decision making, and he was a collaborator when it came to decisions. So allowing Dr. Forlis to be involved in those decisions and collaborate with her as well. He has done some of the hardest work that a superintendent has ever faced. And that includes within a 6-month period. Some do not do as much in their whole career, probably some pretty difficult things, but Dr. Lesser did it in 6 months. He did it with respect, dignity, and leveraged long-standing relationships. He was a steward of the community. Number 3, support and led district initiatives, including collaborative teams, strategic plan, and master facility plan. He has been an integral part in the work of our collaborative teams. During the school closure, he developed collaborative teams to close down schools, and at the same time getting permission and support through the strategic plan and master plan at district level as well as school level. Number 4, develop a budget with an emphasis on attracting and retaining quality teachers, preparing students for college or the workforce, increasing school safety and security, enhancing career and technical education opportunities, ensuring smaller class sizes, providing adequate school staffing, and implementing technology. That's quite a task, that number 4. It involves many things. Since January, he's been involved in 19 budget meetings. And during those budget meetings, he had input from leaders throughout the district. And he developed a plan and a matrix that was a reflection of all the needs and the resources that we had. And he allocated those resources so it would go towards the classroom. And it also looked at the district and cleaned up some things that needed to be cleaned up and looked at things that had not been addressed for quite a while. And much of this was a reflection also on the override and the bond. He utilized that money in such a way that our constituents and our community would be very happy to hear about as they voted for this for our schools and for the money to go into the classroom. Because of his mathematical brain being originating as a math teacher, he was extremely good at presenting budgets in a way that was well understood. And he presented it often at regular board meetings so the community could see it. He showed transparency so they could also understand it and that the board could clearly understand and ask questions. And we really appreciate that he was able to bring that money to the classrooms and help our classified and our teachers and administrators who over the period of this length of time worked very diligently especially during closures. So we appreciate all his work and efforts in those areas. I wanted to highlight a few things because we know that, and we feel very comfortable that Dr. Lesser achieved his goals. But I just want to add, not only did he achieve the goals to our expectations and beyond, but he did it with the grace and the dignity in the class. He did it with heart and caring for the people of this district that not many people are able to accomplish in that short amount of time. He really was handed, as I mentioned before, a lot of challenges as he entered in and decided to take on this position. He loves his wife, and we respect him for loving his wife and wanting to spend retirement time with him. We will miss him when he leaves, but we will always look to him and the example that he has been as our interim superintendent. We've had a similar speech about Dr. Lesser when he retired, but he really capped off his retirement with some great accomplishments over the last 6 months. You helped us during a very difficult time. You have presented us with more transparency for our community, more stability, the ability to trust the district on a higher level through that transparency and hard work. You have built relationships in this district that I believe is the foundation of what makes Mesa Public Schools so great, are the relationships with our employees. That's classified and certificated. This is a family. It's huge, but it has always maintained a small school feel. And you have contributed to that feeling that not many people can do. And so not only did you reach those performance goals and do such an outstanding job, you continued the legacy for Mesa Public School of trust and relationship building. And for that, I will personally say, Dr. Lesser, it has been a privilege and an honor to work with you on the governing board, and thank you for all your many, many hours and wakeful nights where you had many stressful things on your plate. Your dedication and service to this district will always be remembered. Thank you, Dr. Lesser.
President Minor, if I may just for a moment here, number one, I thank you for those many kind remarks that you shared, but I'd like to reflect on something that Dr. Forlis said maybe about a week ago when you were working with her on her goals for a new year and a new superintendent, and she said something like that the goals achieved by the superintendent are never the superintendent doing all of the work, that it takes just a remarkable team to accomplish, I want to say, just the stellar work that has been completed. I've been very blessed to work with a team of people that care deeply and are passionate and are really, really good at what they do. And if I may just say, as I look down the list of this team, and you mentioned communication. Well, that communication supported by me cannot be done without a Helen Hollins and a Heidi Hurst. And the technology plan and bond work that's done can't be done without a David Sanders. And the 20 budget meetings that consumed the entire superintendent executive team, where at times we duked it out a little bit for what was on the priority list. And I tell you that we didn't make everybody happy in the end, but they all supported the conclusion and the end of the work. And a Danny O'Brien and a Scott Thompson for facilitating that process. They're the experts. They're the ones that have supported this great work that we have facilitated as a team. And I look to special education for their continued focus on our most vulnerable students and how we connect with them in our strategic plan. And Sean Holmes, you want to talk about putting together a plan to support our educators and the work environment and the resources that we direct to support our schools. And along with Dr. Holmes, Dr. Driscoll in the area of human resources, supporting, just our employees and working to do the right things with the resources that we have. And I would tell you that Tracy Eastlis in the area of teaching and learning, you want to talk about the lift of what was required in this unique circumstance. Tracy Eastlis and her team and the leadership that she provided to accomplish those pieces. And I look to the area superintendents, when you talk about managing our schools and making sure communication is clear and implementation is done well, we've got, 3 outstanding area assistant superintendents in the work that are Linda Mann and Randy Mallerwine and David McNeil. I'm trying to think, make sure that nobody should be missed. Marlo Loria with her work in business partnerships and her connectedness with the transition to all of the wonderful programming that we do, whether it be Mesa United Way or with Rotary or the Mesa Public Schools Foundation. I know that I'm going to miss somebody here. I can't do it. This can't be done without general counsel and just the remarkable work that our district attorney does for the goodness of policy and making sure that we're on the right track. I'm just looking at my whiteboard here. The person I've got 2 of them, and they really are stepping up and doing amazing work. Holly Williams, who is now the associate superintendent, who has really taken on the duties of facilitating the opening of schools and coordinating the next step in making sure that we're taking care of our community. And I think last but certainly not least on my list here is Dr. Forlis, who has worked tirelessly as the deputy superintendent. And now as your new superintendent. She is a workhorse, and she has a love of learning and a love of our community that I know with that group that I've talked about are just in good hands. And I believe that it is all of their work that allowed for the great things to be done during my 6 months here in Mesa Public Schools. So thank you for your kind words. But boy, oh boy, the experts, the work and the love and the passion goes to those, individuals that, I shared a thought or two about. I talked about special ed, but I didn't say her name, Teresa. I don't think I said Teresa Baca. I really appreciate just her team and the work they're doing to enhance, learning for our youngsters with IEPs. I'm always watchful of forgetting somebody. Somebody out there text me if I forgot somebody. Andy, did I cover everybody? I know that you're out there. Hey, Dr. Forless, did I leave anybody out of that conversation?
I think you got the whole crew and all the teams behind all of them. We're blessed to have such talent in this district.
Thank you. Thank you for covering me on that. So President Minor, thank you for allowing me to just, kind of recraft that statement and just share the great appreciation I have for all of these wonderful individuals. Thank you.
I'm sure there are other board members that may want to say something in regards to the performance goals and achievement of those goals. I want to make sure I give you time if you'd like to do that.
Consistent with what's been said, Pete, we really appreciate what you've done, and not to further belabor the precious time of the people that are here as well as those listening, but I'm not sure words can express the appreciation and the gratitude I feel, but I appreciate it.
I would like to say, as I watched a graduation speech, one thing that stays with me, Denzel Washington made a graduation speech, and then he said, "Thank you." He was like, how those are two simple words, but they say and can say so much. So I want to thank you for your devotion, your tireless efforts, and helping us move forward through not just a challenging time, but an uncertain time. So with that, thank you so much. And I believe that the district's in good hands.
I just add my thanks and admiration and appreciation of you and your whole team and the things that you've been able to do. And you've left us in good shape. And that's what we hoped for, is that we would be able to restore trust and confidence of the people we serve and the students and families we serve. And I think you have helped us do that in a way no one else could have. And we really appreciate you. So we are thankful, and you're not done. This feels, you've got like 3 more weeks, I'm pretty sure. So we'll talk about you more in the next meeting too, but we appreciate it and thank you.
Okay, with that, we need a vote. We don't want to forget the vote. So I will start with Mrs. Richardson.
Emery,
Aye.
no.
Mr. Peterson.
Aye.
Mrs. Sears.
Aye.
Mrs. Minor. Aye. Okay, that is a 4 vote, unanimous, to approve the performance-based pay for Dr. Forless. Excuse me, Dr. Lesser. Don't put that Martha in there. It's Dr. Lesser. Okay. So then so we go to item F, and that is the 2019-20 incentive pay for the interim superintendent. I need a motion for that one as well and let's see, we probably need to read that as it stated, and who would like to make the motion?
I recommend approval of the 2019-20 incentive pay for this interim superintendent.
All right, do I have a second? That was Mr. Peterson. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Mrs. Richardson. The vote starting with Mrs. Sears.
I would like to explain my vote. Can we do such?
You want me to move? I'll have you vote last because you requested to vote last. I apologize. Mr. Peterson? Mrs. Richardson?
Aye.
Mrs. Minor? Aye. Mrs. Sears?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. On tonight for as with Dr. Lesser, you see two items, one the performance and one and the incentives. And as we go forward with transparency with our district, I want you to know these are items that were in Dr. Lesser's contract and in fulfillment of the things that we agreed upon as a board. We now are voting, and I'm voting in the affirmative with my board members to approve those things, because I do, with seeing the different items on there, we do want to be transparent and let you know these are not additional items. These are items that we agreed upon when we entered into negotiation with Dr. Lesser, and now with the fulfillment and being very successful and more than we expected when we took him on, I gleefully and happily vote aye with my fellow board members regarding this agenda item.
Thank you, Mrs. Sears. So that is a 4 vote in favor of the incentive plan confirmed. And before we leave this agenda item, I would like to ask Dr. Forless if maybe that was a great statement by Mrs. Sears, but Dr. Forless, is there any other background information of where the incentive plan comes from so that those who are watching maybe in our community could have a better understanding of how that's done throughout the district?
Yes, thank you very much, President Minor and members of the board and Dr. Lesser. You will see in tonight's agenda, there is a link to the incentive plan guidelines. And so I'll just walk you through those. It's important to know that all of our employees in Mesa Public Schools are eligible for incentive pay, from a substitute teacher to the superintendent. So when we say all employees, it's all employees. The funds that we use to support our incentive pay program come from our 301 funds as well as override dollars. The way that the plan works is that certified, classified, and administrators are all part of the incentive pay program, and there's different expectations for each group. So I can just highlight a couple of items that you will see linked there. So certified staff, the incentive is approximately $3,900. And then that is broken down into 4 different areas. 33% is from their evaluation performance, 29% on climate and culture goal. That has been our focus in Mesa Public Schools on social emotional learning. 28% for their work and reflection on grading practices, and then 10% on quality service. We move on to classified goals. Those are 4% of the employee's earnings. If they are a school-based employee, it's connected to their performance pay is connected to their school improvement goal. If it is a classified staff member as part of a department, also 4.5% of their earnings, and that's connected to a department goal. All administrators, it's 4.5% of their earnings, and that is connected to the work that they do either at a school level or at a district level around continuous improvement and fulfilling a goal of quality service, and climate and culture focusing on social emotional learning. So that's just a high level overview of what you see linked in that agenda to let you know that this is a very inclusive plan that celebrates the work of our employees and is designed, as we talk about the retention and attraction of employees, this is definitely a selling point for Mesa Public Schools.
Thank you, Dr. Forless. That's a great overview. We appreciate it. Okay, with that, we will move on to the next item, which is the 2019-20 revised budget. We can go to Dr. Lesser.
Madam President, members of the board, what I'd like to do right now is call our Chief Financial Officer, Danny O'Brien, to the virtual podium to be able to give you just a brief presentation about the final revised budget for the 2019-20 school year. And I'm sure that this will be tag teamed by Scott Thompson, our Assistant Superintendent of Business and Support Services. So Danny, are you out there and ready to show a few slides regarding the final revised budget?
Yes, Dr. Lesser, I am here. And
Excellent. It looks like it's on the screen.
There it is. Okay, perfect. So good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Lesser, Dr. Forlis. I will be presenting the final revised budget revision for the 2019-2020 school year. If we can move to the next slide. Just a brief overview. This is actually a little bit different. We are supposed to revise by May 15th, but the legislature did give us an extension to be able to revise until June 30th of this year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we wanted to wait a little bit longer past May 15th to allow for some additional information and to get through some of the items that we were dealing with. The two major items that we have for this budget revision is ADM changes. As I always mention during these presentations, our ADM is a living item that changes every month. And so we wanted to try to get the most updated ADM numbers, and also the changes have been made. And then the next other adjustment is we ADE ADM audit, and we will talk about that a little bit further in the presentation that we had to have a adjustment to the budget for. Okay, next slide. This is just a reminder for everybody who's watching and for board members, remembering that we are in current year funding. We did request to the legislature to possibly do a little hold harmless, especially for next year or maybe even this year, but that has not been granted. So we still do have current year funding. Current year funding changes every month, usually somewhere between the 1st and the 7th of every month. ADE supplies us with new reports to allow us to adjust our ADM. The law does not make us have to change our budget every month, but we do, Scott and myself, monitor it and usually supply superintendency with some information on it. Again, remembering that even though we are in the current year funding, the statutes and the laws haven't changed. So as I mentioned last year during our annual financial report, and I've mentioned, I believe, several times in board meetings, our ADM actually doesn't get finalized until July, but the statute does not allow us to adopt a revised budget past, again, usually May 15th. This year, it was pushed to June 30th. So you will have an update during the annual financial report in October that will give you most likely the final numbers for this fiscal year. Next slide. Okay. Again, just talked about this a little bit briefly, but again, we have concurrency. We do have, and I believe Mr. Thompson has spoke about in previous board meetings, and I know we've tendency. The legislature did pass some legislation possibly get 1.25 for ADM this year, based off students who go to summer school and take classes in the summer. Mr. Thompson, if you want to talk about that, I know you've been a little bit more involved in that than I have. We're not sure exactly how that's going to look quite yet, but there is a possibility that concurrency and some other items might come into effect, which could either increase or decrease our budget as we go into the next fiscal year. Mr. Thompson, if you'd like to talk, I'll lean it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Yeah, basically, just to kind of summarize, the legislative budget that was passed that allowed for some changes due to the school closures contemplated the idea that there might be extra kids taking online courses this summer, and therefore tried to increase the funding, particularly during June and July, to 1.25. As Mr. O'Brien said, we've got some sense of the way that's going to play out. And the best way I can summarize it is that we would really like our community and our students to really be considering what is an AOI. Most people don't know what that means, but they do know what MDLP is, which is our online instruction that Mesa has been one of the forefront districts in the state in offering online instruction. And so that, because of that, we were able to, in the past, we have charged tuition for online summer school for most students. This summer, at least 2 classes can be taken with no charge. So it is a benefit not only to our own students, but possibly other students in other districts who want to take advantage of maybe some additional summer classes and the excellent education structure that's provided in the MDLP format. There is a bit of a choice competition in this, and we do hope that students are choosing us over other possibly districts and or other online schools such as Primavera and some of the other 100% online charters, because when students attend those schools, that is that concurrency that is listed on the slide, which means we lose funding because we have to share the 1.0 ADM that we receive with them. That has been increased to 1.25, so we hope to be sharing not quite as much of the impact. So that helps us because we've already done the 1.0 of educating the student. And then in June and July, we lose funding because students choose to maybe take online courses somewhere other than Mesa. So we are aggressively hoping that students will choose us. And that's how the 1.25 is working out at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Appreciate that. I think I put you on the spot a little bit on that one, so I apologize for that.
Fine. Happy to talk about it. Thanks.
Okay, next slide. So again, why do we revise? Next slide. Most of it for this year is in our maintenance and operations fund. So again, a reminder to the public and the board that that is our largest fund within the school district. Next slide. So again, as I spoke before, the main reason to make a revision is because of ADM changes. So this table here just shows the changes across the board within our ADM. Again, we've talked multiple times about the difference between weighted ADM and non-weighted ADM. So we added a column on this one that just kind of shows the difference between the weighted and the unweighted ADM. You can see that we lost some students in preschool and special preschool special ed. We did in K-12. We gained students in 9-12, and then we lost some students in special ed. Probably one thing to point out here is, again, living, breathing document. These could change in our June numbers. They can change in our July numbers. These could be different, and we can talk about them during the AFR in October about possibly where they came out. One of the interesting points on this one is the last point of special ed. It shows that we have a weighted ADM difference of 85 to the negative, and an unweighted ADM change of 291. Again, remembering that when we looked at the weight B counts several times, and as Mr. Thompson and myself have presented, you could have a hearing impaired student who is weighted way heavier than maybe an SLD or SLI student. So that number could look odd to some people, but it is due to the weights and how the weights work. Hearing impaired student could be weighted that for every one student we get 4 students, but an SLI student, for every one student that we have, we get 0.003 extra students. So the number looks fairly odd, but it is accurate, and we've done our research. So I just want to kind of point that out and make sure, and I know my friend Teresa is out there, that they still have very positive numbers in the special ed and doing a lot for the special ed students of Mesa Unified School District, and that some of those are just really a little bit odd based off the weights that we have. Okay, next slide. So this slide shows that our loss in ADM has an effect of approximately $3.2 million to the district. I think one of the things, and we'll probably talk about this more at our proposed budget in a few weeks. We obviously are going to have, not obviously, excuse me, I apologize, that's the wrong word. We most likely are going to have a larger carryover than we might have had in previous years because of the closure and not purchasing some of the items that we usually purchase towards the end of the fiscal year. So I think that currently right now, Mesa Unified School District can hold this and be okay with it. But again, remembering that we've done a few things over the past couple of years to ensure that we watch this every single month, and some vacancy savings and some other items. If you remember correctly from the past couple meetings over the past couple months, these dollars are built into the budget matrix, so they are taken into account as we go forward into the new budget. Next slide.
Mr. O'Brien, I want to just jump in real quick and remind the board this is also the reason that prior to the closure, we have always had some level of carry forward. Without that carry forward, as we kind of discussed at the beginning of this school year, this 3.2 million would have caused us to much earlier in the year have to react and reduce budgets. But because we have contingency funds such as carry forward, we can absorb the 3.2. We planned for it, we understood it. As indicated, the carry forward may be extra a little bit larger next year because of the closures, but that is still a factor. And I just want to remind yourselves and the public that that's why we don't spend 100% of our budget every year as much as we would like to. Current year funding really forces us to make sure that we're able to adjust to these types of impacts if student count goes down or goes up during the year.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thompson. I appreciate that. This slide really just shows the combination of the $2 amounts. I'll talk a little bit about the ADM audit. This is a standard audit that happens throughout the state. We have had it. We've had a couple of them over the past about decade. We did have one. This goes to the 16, 17, 18 school year. We had some ups and downs based on it. There were various items that were found. I believe the board has been updated on this throughout the process. So we AD finalized it in the mid-fall, excuse me. And we are now just taking the budget negative going into the new fiscal year. So it's not something I believe, and I don't think Ken can speak on this call. I apologize for that. I believe the previous one we had about 5 years ago was about $500,000 or $600,000. So this one obviously is a little bit less than that. Some of this has to do with just filing some paperwork and not dotting an I or crossing a T, but it's nothing that we aren't working to fix with the schools and get better at. But it is a standard audit that ADE does across the state.
And I would add, Danny, too, that for a district our size, that it is typical that something is found in an ADE audit of ADM. And I really think it speaks to the quality of our synergy team and the folks who do this work in the district, that over a 3-year period, while that seems like a large number, it's really not in relevance to our overall budget. And I think it does speak well of the work that's been done. And obviously we've improved since the prior audit. So they're going to find something. That's kind of the nature of an audit. And this is very, very reasonable and says we're doing a good job, even though it seems like a big number.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I appreciate that. Because they do a really good job. And it does look like a big number, but overall, it really is small and encompassed of how many students we have. I believe, and I'll probably get it a little bit wrong in talking with Ken earlier, we have 180,000 records that go through our system every year. And to find just a few items across the board is very impressive to our team. Next slide, I think. So this is just kind of to finalize and summarize the budget revision. Again, this is the adopted budget that the board adopted in July. We had a revised budget in December. We're now having the revised budget now in June. So you see the combined number of just under $3.6 million. And again, as Mr. Thompson has spoken, we did have some carryover. We do not believe this is going to affect the overall budget of Mesa, although it is a negative number, and I can appreciate that of some of the members of the public and members of the board looking at that, but it will not have a dramatic effect within the Mesa school budget. Okay, I think next one, is these are the items that will be monitored over the next several months. I know there's probably some questions out there about, well, exactly what is the carryover going to be? How is the closure fixing that? We're continuing to monitor that on a daily and weekly basis. We are now just starting to close out some purchase orders, ones that might have been unused or just the normal course of business of ones that just might have been a little bit higher than what was actually spent, which is something we do every year. Again, as I mentioned with ADM and current year funding, we constantly watch ADM. The final ADM usually comes out in July. So we will have that discussion during our AFR discussion in October. And then superintendency, and I know we spoke about it, and Board President Minor spoke about it. And I want to say thank you to superintendency for allowing us to have our wonderful Friday budget meetings, which were wonderful for me, probably not for all of superintendency. But it was a really good exercise and I greatly appreciate it. But we will continue to finalize some of the savings of the closure through transportation, not running our buses, through some energy savings by having our buildings closed. And I believe probably, I do not want to speak for Dr. Forlis or Mr. Thompson, but I believe we'll probably be giving updates, and also Ms. Williams through our design teams, start to give updates over the next couple months. Next slide. So I just would like to say thank you to the board. And I know sometimes usually we have questions during the presentation, but on the WebEx land, I know sometimes that can be hard. So I'll be more than happy to go back to any slides or answer any questions that the board might have at this time.
I know we need to make a motion because we are going to be asked to vote on these revisions tonight, is my understanding. So maybe what we can do, since we've had the presentation, and thank you, Mr. O'Brien, that was a great presentation, and we will entertain questions here shortly. But I think what we can do at this point is make a motion and a second, and then open it up to discussion and questions at that point. If that's okay with everyone, that's what we will do. And again, this is approval of the revisions. And by the way, those that document that we will be approving tonight will be available to the public for viewing. We always have that information on our budget available to the public. Isn't that correct, Mr. O'Brien?
Yes, as soon as we upload it to ADE, we will always put it on the Fiscal Services website.
Okay, thank you.
It's also part of the agenda item this evening. So
Yes, it's in public documents today and under board docs, also accessible there to the public. Okay, with that, do I hear a motion on this item? Okay, the motion would be that the board approves the revised budget and adopts the revisions. Make sure we state that. And then you can probably say so moved, probably, I would think. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Now for a second.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mrs. Richardson. All right, then we'll have a vote starting with Mrs. Sears.
Aye.
Can we
Mr.
ask some
Peters-
questions? Do you want us to ask
I
questions?
apologize. I did. I keep jumping ahead. Thank you for jumping in. I get ahead of myself. Yes. Questions and discussion before we vote. Thank you, Jenny, for stopping me.
I just want to make sure that I understand. So that nearly $3.6 million that we spent and now don't necessarily get the funding for because our ADM changed comes out of that rollover fund. So it doesn't negatively impact the district. We're not in deficit spending in any way. It's just, it goes into that rollover. And how do we, and I know that next year we've addressed part of that by holding back 70 teacher contracts. You know, it's not good practice for to be in the red at the end of these revised budgets. So what do we do to help make sure that we're not going forward?
thank you, Member Richardson. I think that there's a couple items in that question, so let me take them one at a time. As you remember, we ended last year in 18-19 with about $19 million in unexpended budget capacity, which is considered carry forward. So what has happened this evening is essentially that 19 million has been reduced to 15.5. So that was not dollars that was necessarily committed to payroll or any kind of current expense in our budget. So that is why we have that contingency factor in our budget, so that we don't have to make any drastic changes mid-year. So that kind of answers why. How do you lose the kids and lose 3.6 million and not have to react? Because we planned for it. Carry forward is not a savings account, but it is a contingency account that can be used on an annual basis. Your second question about withholding of contracts, that is really a reflection of our decision-making around the contingencies of next year. It is not, while it is fiscally based, it does certainly save the district money to not hire those districts or those teachers at this time. It's really more about the idea that we don't want to hire staff and not have positions for them to really be teaching. And we're concerned about what the startup of the school year is going to look like, how many students are going to return to school at those first months, and how many teachers are we going to need to address that? Because when you look at large impacts to our budget, as we have talked many, many times before, we are 85 to 88, 89% employee driven at any time. And any large impact to our budget means impacts to our employees. So it is really more in the idea of whether we're just trying to gauge the wind of what's coming to us next with very little information as to what next year is going to look like, and trying to make sure that we can keep the staff that we have employed and don't have to make any drastic changes mid-year, beginning of the year, or even towards the end of the year. Because if large changes come our way, it will be employee-based at some level. We can't fix the budget on the 15% that's left over. We can cut all the supply budgets we want, and that will find a few $1 million, but it won't find millions of dollars if that's necessary based on how next year plays out.
And just to make sure I'm following too on Mrs. Richardson's comment, while 3.6 million is a reduction that we know about, and will reduce our authority to spend accordingly, and the revenue coming in, it may or may not be it probably will not be the final impact that we have on our carry forward, because we have yet to be able to quantify the items that are on your slide here as far as purchase orders that are outstanding, savings from fuel, from being closed, et cetera. So the final impact on our rollover is still kind of unknown at this point. Is that correct?
Absolutely, Member Peterson. It just means it's 3.6 million less if the students had shown up, but it doesn't reflect the final numbers. We highly anticipate that our carry forward will be somewhat unprecedented with the closure. Still very difficult at this point to really give you a solid number, but I know Mr. O'Brien's tracking on a weekly basis. The reason we can't get too specific this evening is I use the example of, let's talk about fuel for the buses. We haven't been running the buses, obviously, the closure. We might have, for example, decided that at the beginning of the year we were going to spend $3 million on fuel, and maybe at the end of the year we find we have only spent $2 million. But we don't have all the bills in yet, and we can't close out the $3 million PO until we get a better eyeball on, are there any left outstanding invoices? Because if we close out the PO too early and then an invoice comes in, we have accounting issues. So we are working hard to narrow down where that savings is. But if you can imagine the fuel PO playing out over and over again throughout the budget of the district, it will take really into the month of July and towards the beginning of August for us to get a really good look at the final invoices that are coming in and be able to close out POs and really get a good number. But we know that the number is going to be much larger than any carry forward we've had before.
Thompson, this is a revised. What is the timeline? So this is a revision. Does this mean, yes, for this budget as far as, yes.
Yes. So that is the last budget revision for this budget. Unfortunately, it's not the last change to this budget, as Mr. O'Brien shared with you. So you really won't see another budget for fiscal year 20. Any other changes and any more of that discussion we'll have at the end of year with the annual financial report, which in many ways is really the most important document that the district produces, because that actually shows the public not where we thought the money was going to be expended, but where it actually was expended. So, and it finalizes kind of how much money we had available to us. The next step will be at the next board meeting, we will be proposing the fiscal year 21 budget. Then the community gets an opportunity to take a look at that budget. And in July, you will then adopt the final version of the fiscal year 21 budget. So we do have 2 more budget meetings in front of us. It is unusual that this has all worked out this way, but as Mr. O'Brien said again, we want to take as much time with the revision as possible, because the more time we have, the more accurate it can be, even though it will change again.
Scott, I have a question for you about kind of policy legislation, but it also at the end probably will post a question about the same thing to Helen about the ADM regarding taking summer classes. What the 2 classes being covered, is that based on amount? Tell me a little bit about the details regarding students being able to take these classes over the summer.
Okay, so think of it in the terms of when we educate a child for 180 days in a brick and mortar situation where they attend school at one of our high schools. If that's the only, we have fulfilled our obligation to them, and if that were all that was going on, we would get 1.0 funding for them, and that would be the end of the story. But many years ago, they introduced the idea of online education. And when they did, the legislature decided that they did not want to pay more than once for a student, regardless of the vehicle, whether they're going to a brick and mortar school or attending online. So they introduced the idea of concurrency. And concurrency can really happen throughout the year, but particularly happens over the summer, because that's when kids take advantage of summer courses. But really, a student could take online course any time of the year, any way, shape, or form, because it's an online format. When they do that, and when that's reported, if they are not attending a Mesa online solution, MDLP, then that funding is concurrently generated through ADE, and we share ADM with them. So if that student were to take the equivalent of maybe 25% of the courses online, then we would only get 75% of the funding, even though they attended 100% of our schools. And we knew that that was going to get worse, because kids are going to flock to online because it's really their only option this summer, and maybe even earlier. Unfortunately, it's happened a lot earlier than June, but the law didn't have we didn't have time in the quick skinny budget that was adopted to really clean this language up. So it just ended up for June and July. We now can get 1.25 for a student instead of just 1. So whether they attend our school MDLP or whether they attend some other online solution, there is more funding shared between the 2 schools. And so we felt that it was, it made sense. Really, at the end of the day, we want kids who are looking for online solutions to pick Mesa. There's no downside to a student choosing MDLP, whether they're our student or attending another school or another school district. So that's why we introduced that into legislation, worked with the lobbyist on that, and tried to just, 1, offset the impact of the idea that kids might go more online, and 2, create that incentive for us to be able to offer more online instruction at tuition-free costs.
Thank you for that explanation. And as I brought up Helen, Helen, definitely, you know, I am one that talks about how do we reach the community and make them aware of this resource. And we all very much want that to happen as board members. So yes, I would like to talk about and be made aware of the types of ways we're getting this information to the public.
Absolutely. This is Helen. I will make sure that you understand not only what we've already done, but some of the plans we have in place in many of our communications, both directly to our families and through our social media, as we have called out MDLP as a free alternative for them to participate in summer learning. I think Jennifer Eccles could speak to the fact that we have contracted with Higley and a number of other, at least Higley, for providing summer learning for their students. And we are in discussions right now on what our marketing for our online programming will look like moving into the fall. I will make sure we keep the board apprised of that.
Any other questions or comments from the board before our vote? Okay, I understand that to mean no, so I'm going to go ahead and call for the vote and start with Mr. Peterson.
Aye.
Mrs. Richardson?
Aye.
Mrs. Sears?
Aye.
And Mrs. Minor? Aye. So that passes with a unanimous vote for the revisions of the budget, 2019-20 revised budget. Okay, so
Thank you,
now
board members.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. We appreciate you and your work, and Mr. Thompson. We now can move on to the item H, 2020-21 employee work calendars. And Dr. Holmes.
Dr. Holmes, yep.
Madam President, members of the board, you may recall that in the course of discussing the budget for the upcoming year, one of the recommendations that we had indicated we would bring to you was to extend the calendar, the work calendars for our elementary office specialists and our registrars of the junior highs. To align with the work calendars of the principals at those schools. And primarily as a customer service matter, particularly in assisting our families getting registered, which coming off the heels of the revised budget, enrollment is incredibly important to our budget. So providing good customer service and support for our schools we felt was important. We've discussed that as a group, and we had advised that we would be bringing that recommendation to you. So that is what this action item is here this evening, is to extend from between 11 and anywhere between 11 and 32, depending on the site, the number of days that those individuals work for that purpose. So with that, I'll answer questions that you have. And if you have none, then we would be asking for your approval this evening of the 2020-21 employee work calendars as described in the memo attached to this agenda item.
Thank you, Dr. Holmes. We'll start with a motion and then open it up for questions and discussion after. So do I hear a motion for the recommendation to adjust the work calendars for registrars at junior high schools and office specialists at elementary schools?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Richardson. Do I have a second?
Kiana Sears, seconds.
Thank you, Mrs. Sears. Now, is there any questions for Dr. Holmes or any discussion at this point?
Yeah, I do. So Dr. Holmes, just understanding this, will this totally do the alignment that we spoke of with the preschools as well as the classes, in order that there's always accessibility and office staff for to be able to be there kind of as a response to preschool?
That is a different topic. This is a matter of the start date and end date for work for the individuals in question. So currently in the month of July, the principal secretary comes to work, and then much closer to the start of school, the registrars and office specialists come back to work. And then on the back end of the school year, where the registrars and office specialists conclude their work calendars close to the end of school, the principal secretary is extended a bit. So The matter at hand is about increasing the number of days that those two employee groups work, not a matter of their hours. So the preschool issue that you're inquiring about is a different subject.
Mrs. Spears, if I may just add a little bit of information to that. When we start to discuss the coverage of the extended day where preschool fits in, that conversation is a collaboration between preschool and the principal and the office staff to determine what kind of distribution of those resources can cover the entire day that students are on that campus. Now, I can't tell you what that looks like on every single campus because of the support either that they, or the resources that they either do or don't have. I will tell you that the second 29-hour assistant in preschool will absolutely provide resources for different coverage throughout the entire day as well. So I would share with you that the collaboration between preschool, the principal, and the office staff was, it will need to come through the area soups and their conversations with the principals about making sure that we're taking care of all of our programs under the unique circumstances at preschool. It really goes from 9 o'clock until 4 o'clock.
So my question is that affects about, by my estimation, about 60 employees throughout the district of our elementary schools and junior highs. And I'm just wondering, are they all, some of them might have liked their shorter work calendar, and now we've increased what their job is. What kind of flexibility are we giving them in changing positions if that's important to them? Or how are we accommodating those employees that maybe this isn't a welcome change to their calendar?
We can't do that on a case-by-case basis, but I think we know as it stands, this is an issue where many sites were using their own budgets to support bringing folks in early and or keeping them later in the school year. So I don't anticipate that is going to be an issue. This was actually, just so you, by the way, this was an issue that was brought to us through the principals. So this was a request that the principals were making of district administration that we move towards this schedule.
Great. I just wanted to make sure that the employees who maybe aren't thrilled about this longer work calendar had options available to them if that was the case. But I imagine most of them have maybe already been working. Then it sounds like this length of calendar, this is now just a district funded change. And I think that's great.
Mrs. Sears, pertaining to your question, I know that we've got the area soups on the line here with us today, and Dr. Forlis and I will be sure to just revisit the issue about coverage throughout the entire day and how we support all programs that are on a campus, and we'll revisit that with our principals. Thank you.
I just got word from Frank Hunter, and I wanted to chime in on a comment that he made, and that is that this will help with safety for office staff during summer, and having two in the office also helps with registration and answering parent concerns. So I thought that was worth mentioning during this discussion. So we appreciate that too. Anyone else have any comments before the vote or questions? Okay, with that, let's go ahead with the vote. Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Mrs. Richardson?
Aye.
Mrs. Sears?
Aye.
And Mrs. Minor? Aye. So that is a 4 vote in favor of the employee work calendars approval. Okay, that is the end of our action items. And so we will move on to the discussion items. And that would be number 8A, Open School Task Force. Everybody's always interested in this item. So we will open that up, since I believe Dr. Forlis, that's your charge. We'll allow you to to speak at this time.
Thank you, President Minor, members of the board, and Dr. Lesser. In just a moment, Mrs. Holly Williams is going to lead you through a high-level overview of the work that is being done to open up our schools. I want to assure the board that there is a ton of work being done to study the best practices, to study the best models, and to bring creative thinkers together to think about how do we open up school in the fall. And we have some very, very firm commitments to our community. Is that every decision that we make is designed to ensure and build their confidence. And we know that in order to do that, we have to provide safe learning environments, not only for our students, but also for our staff, and that we have to provide ample choices for our families as they come back to school in the fall. So that has been the guiding philosophy of the Opening School Task Force. Mrs. Williams has done an amazing job of corralling these design teams, coordinating them, and is going to give us an update on where we are and give you an opportunity to ask some really important questions. So, Mrs. Williams.
Thank you, Dr. Flores. So as Dr. Flores shared, we have a little overview tonight of the work that's being done. And I'd like to tell you that today we have it all solved and everything's going to be fine on August 4th. The second part of that statement is true. Everything's going to be fine on August 4th. We don't have it all figured out yet, and we are actively working on making sure that our plan is solid, has lots of ways added to it, and is the best solution for the students of Mesa, so that all families, as Dr. Flores said, feel safe and feel like they have a choice. But more importantly, that choice is Mesa Public Schools, that this is where they're going to send their children because we have the best options for their families. And this is what our guiding principles have been. So Ina, if you don't mind starting the PowerPoint on slide 2, that would help me, please. The commitments, again, that we set for our design teams and our task force overall, keep in mind these 5 principles: that the safety and wellness of our students, employees, and community are crucial, that we are transitioning by offering choice, that we have confidence of our families and confidence of our staff, that we're going to provide safe learning environments, and that we are keeping our focus on our promise and offering personalized learning opportunities for our students. That will look different in different places, but these are the guiding ideas that all of our design teams have used as they've made decisions and drafted recommendations around what we should be doing in the fall. So if you'd move ahead for me, Ina, thank you. Just a reminder again that we have 11 design teams working diligently. I didn't, in this presentation tonight, I'm not giving you an update from all of them because there is a big due date tomorrow. All 11 teams have a plan due tomorrow about what this is going to look like. Their draft best ideas, and they have spent weeks working on this, and they will spend many more weeks working on it. But their best draft is due tomorrow, and I'll show you what we're going to do with that information next. So Ina, if you'll move forward for me. Remembering, I'm just reminding you of the things that we're working on, included 3 options for teaching and learning, including a face-to-face, a hybrid or an intermittent, and a remote. The idea of face-to-face means something that looks a little more traditional that we're used to. What it looks like yet, we don't know, but that's our goal. Hybrid and intermittent is those stoppage and startage times that we perhaps have families who have some immune situations where they will come in and out, or we might have a small school closure during the school year, not a lengthy one, but a short one, just so we can do some deep cleaning. That's what those are designed to be. And then of course our remote, which would be what I firmly hope with my little rose-colored glasses that we don't ever have to use again, but that would be a complete closure that we'd have to move to fully remote again. The reason that we're planning, I subscribe to the philosophy of plan for the worst and hope for the best. So we have to plan for all of this to make sure that we're ready, boots on the ground, and can get going as the switch is flipped. As if nothing else, what we've learned this spring is that Things change way rapidly, and we have to be ready for it. And I think we did a great job here this spring, and we continue to be thoughtful about how we're going to proceed into the fall, building and learning on the lessons that we learned this spring. So Ina, if you'll switch for me. I want to remind you of our timeline, and I added a little arrow. You know how I like arrows from my master plan presentations to show you where we are. Where we are is tomorrow the plans are due, which means that they're coming into my office, and we will take them and put them into the next stage, which would be our stakeholder group meetings and getting those drafts in front of our community. And tonight I'm going to share with you that plan and what that will look like, so that you can get a feel for what happens in the next two stages, which is the next one is the most important part, because we need to hear from our community and all the stakeholder groups about what they think about the drafts, the best work that we've done so far. And then we'll spend time revising and refining those plans so that in July we are ready to roll them out to our families and our leaders, so that our teachers can be ready to execute those come August 4th, which again, I don't know if I said it, but it's 56 days from now. So no stress, right? We'll be fine. We're going to be great on August 4th. So Ina, if you'll move forward, I can share the stakeholder information. So here's what we have planned. As Dr. Forler said earlier in the meeting, we are not in a place in Arizona yet where we can hold face-to-face meetings of groups larger than 10 people. So we feel in order to hear the most voices in our community, a virtual platform is what we're going to do. So we have these stakeholder meetings +1, and I'll talk to you about the +1 in a second. But these stakeholder meetings scheduled, and you'll see that some of them are at the same time. And how are you going to do that? Well, that's the beauty of a virtual world, right? We can hold simultaneous meetings with different facilitators at the same time in different WebEx rooms happening all at the same time and pulling that feedback in. The goal of these groups was to provide different times of day to provide access to folks so that they could have an afternoon and a morning opportunity, or an evening if that's what they choose. We have Spanish speaking ones available that will be facilitated by Spanish speaking facilitators. Arlinda Mann and Monica Mesa have graciously volunteered to lead those facilitated parent group sessions. And the goal of these will be to couple of things. One, lay out the data that we've collected from the thousands of voices who filled out the survey. Helen, I'm not going to remember the numbers off the top of my head. Do you mind jumping in and telling us survey response numbers?
Yes, so we had over 15,000 parents. We had just under 6,000 students respond to our survey. We're at approximately just over 3,000 non-teaching staff, and I believe we're at approximately 3,000 teaching staff. So 28,000 total responses to our surveys.
Thank you, Helen. I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I knew you knew it off the top of your head, so I appreciate that. So using that data, we want to show that to these stakeholder meetings to show them the data that we've used to inform our decision. We want to then show them the major ideas of these draft plans. What are the buckets that we're coming up with, and getting our arms around it in ways like, this is what our cleaning protocol will look like. These are the items that we'll make sure are happening. This is what you can expect to see in a classroom. This is what you can expect from athletics or our specials classes, which I was told today we should not call them specials, we should call them essentials. So I'm learning new language. But the idea being that we want to share from each of these design teams their best ideas. How are we going to transport students? What's the daily schedule going to look like? What can they expect? And share that out, and then hear from the stakeholders. So we'll have parents sharing, we'll have teachers and staff, and we'll have students. And the +1 that I talked about earlier is we have our district leaders too. I have a date scheduled for them to be able to give us some feedback on this. Many of them are already serving on these design teams, but not all of them. So we want to give everybody an opportunity to hear the whole plan and give us feedback before it becomes the document that moves forward. So how are we going to communicate this information? The next slide. Miguel, let me just tell you, is a rock star. So We have a website where you can RSVP with a fillable form, or you can text Mesa to 41411 to sign up. I tried it today. Super cool. You text that and the Google form pops right up on your phone. You RSVP and Miguel will schedule you into one of the WebEx meetings and send you the invite link so that you can participate in that meeting. We're also going to control the size of those meetings, so it's not like 400 people in one WebEx. That's not a manageable group. So we have multiple people signed up to facilitate on each of those times. So when you see a June 18th from 3 to 5, it looks like it's one meeting, but within that time slot, there might be 4 meetings happening so that they are manageable groups of people so that all voices can be heard and you can't hide behind 400 other people, or you can't raise your hand enough to be seen in that time. So we're trying to set the groups about 25 per group, and we'll expand or contract those as RSVPs start to come in. That information will be shared with our community starting tomorrow via School Messenger. It will also be on our website, and we will be sharing through our lunch service beginning next week. At the beginning of the week, they will receive flyers when they pick up lunches so that they can have the information about signing up also. These meetings will be both via WebEx, but you can participate either on your laptop or you have an option to call in and participate via phone. The meetings are designed to be interactive in that we will do a presentation, and during the presentation, we will do some polling so we can get some in the moment feedback as the topics are being discussed. And then at the end, a facilitated discussion with the person, kind of like we did for master planning. Those of you who attended those sessions remember we did a presentation, we did some polling, and at the end, we did a small group discussion with a facilitator, gathering the anecdotal feedback and taking notes about what people said. So we will have all of that ready to go beginning on the 18th. Okay, Ina, I think that's my last slide. I would happily answer any questions you have. I'm so proud of the work that the design teams are doing. I want to share with you an anecdote that I shared with the design team leaders just a little while ago. I had my design team today. The members of the team shared that they wanted to thank Superintendency and the design team leaders for including the teacher voices. It was shared from that perspective, that they have friends in other districts whose the district leadership is making the plan and then sharing it down, and they have had little to no opportunity to share their perspective on from a teacher lens of how this should look, and they're very appreciative of the opportunity to participate and share. And they are excited about their colleagues getting to share in the form of the stakeholder meetings next week. So realizing that committees can't be thousands of people strong, but that more voices can be heard through the stakeholder opportunities. So that was an exciting a little bit of feedback that I got today just in my design team that I thought was worth sharing with you, that people feel included in our organization. They feel like we have a plan to include other voices, and they are happy about both of those things. So I'm happy to answer your questions.
Holly, this is Andy. I wanted to say thank you so much for the hard work, the thoughtful work. We are navigating times of uncertainty, but we're doing it with confidence, and we're doing it with an incredible amount of appreciation for those who are coming forth to work on the design teams. Also want to remind the governing board that we have a governing board meeting on June 23rd. So we would like to propose that during our work study that maybe we can extend that for a bit of time, and that we could conduct a focus group with you as well, so that you can weigh in on our plans, and that you will go through the same process that our community is participating in. President Minor.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you. That feels good. That's nice. I appreciate that.
I was going to text Mesa to 41411 to get signed up for a meeting, but now we won't have to.
Yeah.
Do it anyway, just because it's fun. It's so cool to do it. I don't know
all my friends. Yeah.
You know, we have, as you know, we've received a few emails where people felt like that would be one way to express their voice and get it to people that will be helping in making decisions. So if we could, maybe I can coordinate with Martha to send responses to all those emails, encouraging them to go to the forums and to be able to listen to what's going on and be able to feel heard from that platform as well, because this is set up just for that specific reason. And I am thrilled to see the efforts you have made to get feedback from our parents, because I'm sure other board members can attest to this. But everywhere I go, every phone call, text, from anywhere from grandparents, because I have to say I hear from grandparents now, down to the parents who are in the schools now, everyone's asking the same questions. And so you know that there is going to be a great opportunity to let them know that this is a forum for them. So thank you. Thank you, Holly.
President Minor, I do want to let you know today, through a collaboration with Dr. Forlis, Helen Hollins, myself, and Martha Head, we have been tracking all of the emails that either have come to you or have come to superintendency or one of us individually. And although we have not tailored a response to those, an individual response, we did email 157 of our community members who had emailed all of you with an email indicating that we're having the focus groups and that later this week they should receive another communication about doing exactly what you described. We also attached the letter that we sent on Friday to all of our families with updated information about the work we're doing in the design teams as well. So we have sent out 157 emails today to remind them of their participation in focus groups.
I appreciate the efforts that are being done to be flexible for as large as we are, as we try and do everything we can to retain those students and have them being very excited to come back to Mesa Public Schools. So thank you for your efforts. And it's not easy, an organization our size. So I appreciate it.
Yes, and for those who have emailed us, please know that we do read them and that our superintendent reads them and that we do pay attention. Those are not in vain. We appreciate your voice, but now that we have this forum, that is even a greater opportunity, so that we're encourage people to go to this site and participate. That would be the best way to have your voice heard.
President Minor, thank you for making that statement, that these emails that are sent to us are reviewed. They're all reviewed, and some by multiple people, depending on what channels they've moved through. And so we do want to reassure individuals as they reach out to share their perspective, their interests, their desires, that all of those are read and that we've shared them with the appropriate design team if there is information that relates to the work that they're doing. So we have done that as well in this process of getting feedback through emails.
So in other words, if somebody writes us about a safety issue they're concerned about, you will send it to that committee that talks about safety, so they'll have that specific input from a parent or individual.
Absolutely. Now, there are times when there are emails that are similar to each other that we've already communicated, that to the group, whether it be about, wearing face masks or social distancing, or the interest in having specials classes or essential classes like PE and music. So, we've attempted to communicate that with the groups that are making decisions or that's important for the plan that they're putting in place, or at least the draft plan.
This is Helen Collins. We do have one public comment for this agenda item.
Okay. We have, I think I heard that, Mrs. Hollins, that we have a public comment. Is that what you said?
Yes, ma'am, we just have one.
Okay, go ahead. Unless, Kiana, did you have a comment before we take that?
Yes, I did. Is Miss Mesa and Miss Mann on the line?
Mrs. Mann should be yes.
This is Mrs. Mann. What can I do for you, Ms. Sears?
Yes, I did. I'm excited to hear that you will have the focus groups and so it can be accessible to Spanish-speaking families. I would like to touch base with you for additional resources and contacts regarding that.
Absolutely, we can do that.
I just didn't want to let it pass because
I'm happy to get with you on that, Mrs. Sears. Absolutely.
thank you.
Mrs. Hollins, would you go ahead with the public comment, please?
Yes, the comment is from Ashton Newman. Simple, as a teacher, excuse me, as a new teacher coming in, if there isn't going to be in-person TNT, how will we be getting our laptops?
Good question.
Standards might be appropriate for that.
Tracy Islas, I know, is working with the IS department. So Tracy or David?
This is Tracy. Yes, typically our professional learning department works with the IS department to distribute those laptops. And while they're in planning right now for transitioning to a virtual model, I would anticipate that we will have some distribution centers for our new employees, as well as through the onboarding system. So those details are still in the planning stages right now, but we'll be making sure that we get communication out to all of our new staff to ensure that you've got your laptops and are ready to go with any access that you need.
I have one question that may be a little bit off, but close enough, because when we're talking about starting schools, I have heard from a few people that there is still opportunities at the beginning of schools, maybe to get yearbooks that they weren't able to get at their high school or their junior high, or other things that are still kind of hanging out there because of maybe people couldn't get to the schools during the time they were open, etc. Would you mind just briefly addressing that for those of the people that are watching, and also so when people ask me, I'll have a good answer for them on that.
Yes, if you don't mind, I'll jump in on that. I do know that many of our high schools are doing some what they're calling cleanup days, and they're putting them out via Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. I saw that Westwood has some of those days scheduled in this week and next. So I would encourage them to reach out to their school principals to ask that question. But I also know that many of our elementary schools are planning on doing some yearbook distribution in the fall. Because they didn't do it this spring. So I believe that we will have a lot of things that we don't usually have in the fall available for students, because we know that the carry forward, especially with the underclassmen, that they're coming back, their things will still be there waiting for them so that they can pick them up. They won't be given away.
Thank you. And hopefully it's not a tuna fish sandwich.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping. We hope we got all those cleaned out before we ended.
I do have a question regarding I know we're coming out with several different plans. Do we have an additional person? Because I know in our, just getting myself caught up to speed, because I heard Tracy Islas. Is there another curriculum person as well? We just hire a new one?
Mrs. Sears, this is Pete Lesser. We recently had a resignation of one of our directors. So the hire that you approved this evening is replacing a director out of teaching and learning who resigned a short time ago. So it's not an additional one, it's the replacement of a person who resigned their position.
Okay. I was thinking with, different modules, I just had innovation in my mind because I know there's a lot going on with teaching and learning, and that has to adapt with what we're doing. Okay. So I'll save my creative thinking to the next time.
Okay, with that, is there any more questions or comments before we move on to the next item? Thank you, Mrs. Williams. That was an excellent presentation. I understood every bit of it. Thank you. Very clear. All right, we'll move on to discussion item B, Superintendent's update.
President Minor, members of the board, thank you for allowing me a little bit of time this evening to just discuss one issue or one topic that is part of our discussion. And I would start by saying this, that in light of the recent tragic events across the state and nation regarding discrimination and injustice, we have reflected on the role of Mesa Public Schools in ensuring equity and justice to the students, families and employees that we serve. I have discussed these concerns with our mayor, several board members, our leadership team, and members of our Black community. And we have concluded that it was necessary for Mesa Public Schools to share with our community that we oppose all forms of discrimination, racism, and injustice, and will take the necessary steps to support equity and justice for all students, families, and employees. And the communication that we sent out last Thursday, if I may take a moment to just read it for our listeners and viewers. And the communication reads like this: Mesa Public Schools family, we are saddened by the tragic events that have occurred in our state and nation. We recognize the pain and anger these events have caused members of the Black community. Mesa Public Schools stands with our communities of color and condemns racism, discrimination, and injustice. We will confront it where it exists. We know that there is work to be done in Mesa Public Schools. As we prepare for the 2020-21 school year, we are committed to creating an equitable and just society, and we recognize the hard work necessary to achieve this outcome. We fully embrace our responsibility and role in the community for providing inclusion, belonging, and justice. Our classrooms are filled with students and teachers of all races, religions, ethnicities, nationalities, and identities. The voice of this diversity is a valued strength in the Mesa community. Every child deserves a safe, inclusive, and respectful learning environment that promotes equity and justice for all students. Our new strategic plan includes a goal on ensuring equity. This important work will take time and commitment from all involved. We need to listen to those who have experienced inequity and identify strategies that will close gaps in equity and justice so no students are discriminated against, marginalized, judged, or overlooked. This requires each of us to examine, confront, and eliminate our own biases. We will continue to build a culturally proficient staff who understands and honors the lived experiences of each other, our students, and their families. This will allow us to deliver on our promise of knowing each student by name, serving them by strength and need, and helping them graduate ready for college, career, and community. We expect our employees to model the behaviors of equity and justice as they support, guide, and protect our students. As we strive for inclusion, equity, and justice, we must work together to ensure all students the support they need, have what they need to be successful. Through kindness, empathy, and respect for one another, we can make our community stronger, our world a better place, and provide hope for a better tomorrow. If you have feedback to offer that will help inform our work on equity and justice, please submit your thoughts to equity@mpsaz.org. That is the communication that we shared with our community last Thursday. I would share with you, and probably Mrs. Hollins can give a little more insight. I know directly after sharing this, that we received emails at this email address that we will use to help inform our continued work on the voice of equity and justice for our students. And Mrs. Hollins, I may throw one your way to say, what's your knowledge of the number of people that have responded in some way with feedback after providing this message? Do we have that number, or at least what that looks like right now?
We do, Dr. Lesser, thank you. We currently have 68 emails that have come into equity@mpsaz.org, and we have set up a triage system where we are quickly assessing the emails as they come in to determine, to be honest with you, many of them were what we deemed as a positive thank you, just a recognition of appreciation that we sent a message like that out, and we marked those appropriately. Many of them have come in with suggestions of either programs that we may want to consider or opportunities to engage with the community on the conversation about equity. So we have tagged those specifically so that we can follow up on those suggestions and share them appropriately with the right individuals as we move forward. And then, of course, we have some that expressed a negative reaction to our message, and we certainly have those marked as well as needing a response and looking specifically at what their concerns were so that we can either address that our words were not read as we intended, which can always be the case, or acknowledge that perhaps we fell short somewhere in our message. So we are actively working on those. Myself, Miguel Flores, and Dr. Forlis are all involved in that endeavor.
Thank you, Mrs. Hollins. So, board members, this is, I've called it the superintendent's update. I thought it was an important message to share publicly, even though we've distributed to all of our staff and all of our families. I thought it was important to be able to share it in a board meeting and absolutely allow any of you or all of you to weigh in on that communication and position from our leadership team regarding justice and equity.
I appreciate your, I thought it was a well-prepared and well-written document that conveyed what a lot of us are hoping to do, and that is be better in the work that we do in educating our students. And I know that equity is one of those parts of the strategic plan that we want to focus on next year. There's 5 steps. We think it's so important. We want to work on it soon, and we want to keep it in the forefront of every conversation. And it, for right now, certainly the coronavirus has highlighted the digital divide in the access that some of our families have, and that's a priority in equity for some of us, making sure that we have equitable practices in our discipline. There'll be a variety of ways that we as a board can help support this movement for more equity, that we can look and understand what our data teaches us about what we're doing, and we can set specific goals for where we want to see improvement over the next year. And I appreciate the chance to focus on this part that we all feel like is an essential element in helping every student reach their full potential through the help we can provide in Mesa Public Schools. So thank you.
I do appreciate the comment, and it feels like it's key to us as we strive to really go forward with our commitment to our students, and that all are treated equally and have equal opportunity, regardless of what may have happened to been our race or religion or whatever it may be, and appreciate the effort that was put forward. I support it.
I definitely appreciate the support of the board and having an agreed upon statement and the district and going forth with leadership, and look forward to the continued work that we're going to put in to strengthen our communities, our future leaders, and our district.
And I will echo what everyone has said. I appreciate the tone of the statement. We love all the children in our school district. We want nothing more than to have all of those kids, all those children have the same opportunities, and with equity and the resources, everything that we do, we need to be focusing on all children, as our mission statement describes, that we need to know them by their strength, their name. And I apologize, I don't have it as memorized as some of our administrators, but I really appreciated the tone, and we love our kids, each and every one of them. And we appreciate all the efforts that our teachers and our principals and all those who work behind the scenes do in order to provide an education for these kids. I know, Dr. Lesser, that a lot of thought went into that statement and input from others in our community as well as our district. And I appreciate the time and effort that you went to put what I consider a very strong and positive statement about what we need to do as a district for kids. And I thank you for that.
You're welcome. The leadership team for Mesa Public Schools believes that we've got work to do and we want to be better. And that will be our focus. And we believe completely that we can listen to voices differently, hear voices differently, make sure that we reach out to more voices in the work that we do to provide that opportunity for all students. And I think it's so critical in our promise is that we serve them by strength and need. We want to find what each child needs to be successful and then deliver that resource to them so they can reach their greatest potential. So thank you for your support of that and the hard work that will be done moving forward. Thank you.
You said it better than I did, Dr. Lesser. That was great. Thank you. All right, now we are going to move on to our policies. Number 9, and this is a first read for both policies. We'll begin with A, policy G, teleworking, called teleworking. And we'll take it away, Mrs. Gregson. Ms. Gregson.
Thank you, Mrs. Minor. Proposed policy GF on teleworking will be a new policy for the district, and this would authorize employees to work from alternate locations during any mandatory or governing board approved school closures, and then any other times that wouldn't have a negative impact on the district. So this policy is really just a general authorization by the board, and through this policy you would direct the superintendent to develop a regulation to establish more of the details, such as who would be eligible for teleworking, the circumstances under which teleworking arrangements could be made, and the procedures that employees would need to follow in order to telework. This is a first reading, so if you have any questions or would like to have a discussion, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
I was happy to see the part that said at other times such an arrangement would not have a negative impact. I wondered if, I think that will be one of the things going forward is that we'll see that maybe there are some jobs that can be done from home at least part of the time, and that might be preferable in some situations. And I think that kind of flexibility for our employees where possible is something we want to look into and celebrate. So I appreciated that flexibility was written into there It wasn't just in times of crisis, but there were maybe other opportunities as well.
Questions?
President Minor, if I may just add a thought to what Ms. Gregson had shared with the board, is this is a brand new policy. So we haven't had any policy that has governed this thought. And you'll see that the policy is rather succinct. It simply provides the authority of the superintendent to create the framework for this to potentially happen. So, if we head down this path and another meeting from now, the policy is approved, then the real work is, what are the particulars in the regulation that govern how you implement it? And so that's why the policy is brief, because the regulation will be the implementation of
it. All right, we can move on then to the first reading of policy IGBI, distance learning.
I think you're on mute.
Somebody muted me. I'm sorry about that. I did not notice. So what I had said was that draft policy IGBI on distance learning is like the previous policy, a new policy for the district. Although we've had MDLP, or Mesa Distance Learning Program, for many years, we don't currently have a policy where the board has authorized distance or remote learning. So this new policy would authorize the district to offer distance learning to students, and that would be for things like independent study, credit recovery courses, enrichment courses, and things like that. But in the Arizona Department of Education's roadmap to opening up schools, there was a recommendation for emergency distance learning policy. So this policy would also cover your authorizing the district to offer distance learning during times of school closures due to widespread illness or natural disasters or other types of emergencies. Again, you'll notice this policy is general, really giving the board authority to the superintendent to develop a regulation that would put the details in place and allow us to implement this policy.
Any questions? It's sounding like there's no questions. There's total silence. So I think we're good. Again, these are the first reads on both of these policies. We'll see them again probably in the next board meeting. And also the regulations will be developed later on. It takes a lot more time, as you mentioned in our agenda meeting. So those will follow, and the board does not approve the regulations, just the policy. Okay, if that's not on that.
I do have a question. I do have a comment on the policy, and I think I've wrote those up. That we know there's going to be restrictions and exemptions and exceptions that may occur when it gets before and after it gets implemented. I know we will learn things, but the things that we know ahead of time with this, I would ask that Dr. Forlis give the board an update, because after we've approved something, it kind of has its life cycle and does some things, but it's just good for us to kind of know these are the implications. This is what I was thinking. This is the direction of what I'm thinking and what that looks like in actuality coming forth. I know we're going to get a second read as it's coming together, but it helps with us to kind of know the vision, and this is what we're thinking. One, we know we don't have a policy. That's why we need one. Secondly, this is kind of the thought behind it and how our new superintendent sees it interacting and what the elements are to the degree that we currently know. So kind of just information informing us.
Thank you, Mrs. Sears. And as the regulation is ready to be finalized, it will be put into status for the board's consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we go to the last item, is there anything else that I may have forgotten or need to mention, or somebody needs to mention before we end the meeting?
Well, just remember, President Minor, that it would need to be on this agenda item and not just generally speaking. Okay. All right.
Oh,
If they got a comment on this
can-
agenda item.
I was thinking of a lot of things we could talk about right now.
Other than that, let's move on to the last agenda item.
Okay, I just want to make sure that there aren't any comments at the end before we adjourn. So the last item is adjournment, and I need a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn this meeting with our thoughts and prayers to Marcy and her father, whose health is struggling.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Richardson. Do I have a second?
Kiana Sears seconds.
Thank you, Mrs. Sears. And now the vote, Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Mrs. Richardson?
Aye.
Mrs. Sears?
Aye.
And Mrs. Minor? Aye. That is a vote to confirm that we are now adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night, guys. Remember to red X.